Vocab, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. My name is Vocab. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, originally from Columbus, Ohio. And I specialize mainly in counter cult issues, especially lesser known cults. So like the Kemetic guys, Hebrew Israelites, 5%ers, Nation of Islam, a little bit of Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. That's the main stuff I do as far as apologetics online. And that's pretty much it, you know. I like turtles and Transformers, as you can kind of see in the background.
Cool. I actually have a Hebrew Israelite coming on. What would you say is the best argument to use against them?
Well, man, do I want to help an atheist or not? No, I think you can point out readings of scripture that are wrong, even from your perspective. I imagine, though, some of the readings of scripture you would say that they're right about and are part of the reason why you don't believe. So it could be an interesting conversation. But I think there's other places where you could see that doesn't sound like, at the very least, a commonsensical reading of the passage. But if you want to go more scientific route, questions of DNA are significant, and you got to watch what they say in regards to DNA. They usually make a lot of claims that can't be justified, or they just write it off entirely, which I think also can be shown. Why are you doing that? And then also views of alternative history that they'll put forth. So you just kind of listen what they say, because the claims are across many disciplines frequently. So it should be an interesting conversation. Do you know who the guy is?
I saw his name. It's another guy. Jeff set up. Jeff sets up all my debates. He does all the real work here. I just kind of show up and talk. But
Must be nice.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Well, I'd be curious to see who it is. If you think sometimes Christians don't understand atheists, just wait till you deal with a Hebrew Israelite. I think they really don't understand atheists.
Warrior of Yahweh, Warriors of Yahweh is
probably Yahweh is probably what it meant. Yahweh is a contrived pronunciation of the divine name, and so they use non-standard Hebrew. So that probably means you're dealing with a one Wester if they use that language, which is called Lashawan Kodash. And so with that, you could even ask them how they derive their system of Hebrew, because it's ahistorical, you know. But yeah, Yahweh is their version of the divine name, but it has no basis in history, you know. Even Jehovah, which is sort of an Germanicization or whatever, is Jehovah's better than Yahweh in some ways, because at least we know where the mistake comes from. But anyways.
Gotcha. That's good advice. I'll check out those things, do some Googling, see if I can use those against him.
Yeah, let's see. You can ask him, what do you think God's going to do with you based upon who your father is? Because it may be condemn you to slavery for 1,000 years until you're wiped out of existence.
Cool. I'll check it out. But the topic for today is Christianity true? I think that was the topic. Yes. So I'm an atheist. I have
good answer.
It is not.
The discussion's over. Is Christianity true? Yes. Take that clip right there.
Oh, you're supposed to be taking the no position. I take the yes position. That's how this works. It's like a pseudo debate kind of thing.
I've done that before in regards to Islam and some other stuff. It's fun.
Me as well. I've done one with Christianity with Samuel Nassan. He was the atheist. I was the Christian.
Wonder how that went.
It was very interesting. Very interesting. But so tell me your position. Is Christianity true?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends how we define Christianity. But as a general thing, I'll just say, yeah.
Cool. And what evidence do you think indicates that it's true? Because I'm an atheist, of course, so I don't think the evidence indicates Christianity. So What do you think tells
But
us, indicates it?
if the evidence did, you'd become a Christian, I assume.
I would believe in God's existence. I wouldn't worship him, though.
Oh, so you'd just become a theist.
I guess so.
Well, then Christianity wouldn't be true, would it?
Well, I think Christianity would be true. I just wouldn't think the God was worth worshiping.
So even if Christianity was true, you wouldn't adhere to it still.
Right, because I think that the moral doctrines of the Bible are immoral.
So I guess in a way our discussion's not really is Christianity true. It's is it worth following maybe?
Do that too. That's fine with me. I'm more interested like, do the facts indicate it? I think it does not. So I think
Right.
that's more important than would I follow it. Would I personally follow it? Doesn't seem as relevant.
Well, it's relevant to you, certainly. Well, let me go here. You know, I'm a Christian, so I don't have any shame that I believe the Bible, right? Well, I say right, but then you've had all kinds of people on with all kinds of positions. But I'm going to start in Romans 1:18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, but God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Only 2 more verses here. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies amongst themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So to me, that's a perfect description of life under the sun sans the God of the Bible. And even that's, of course, only in the essentially the person's imagination. It's not the case. And so everything you see laid out there is what happens when you deny the God of the Bible. And I think that's important because I think we have a good view of anthropology from there, a good theology, a good view of what creation is and what it isn't, and a good view of, to a certain extent, history as well, because we see that. And so I read that, but I believe it's evidentially true as well. And so the big thing is there, of course, is that's made plain to them through conscience and creation, internal and external.
Oh, it doesn't seem plain to me internally or externally. Could you help me? What is the evidence that makes it plain?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, I think the intelligent design arguments match up with this. You know, God has made it plain to them, whether we take a microscope or a telescope, that reality accords with design and creation, wisdom, intelligence, even aesthetically beautiful things. You know, it's not just functional. It's actually, there's a beauty to it as well. None of that's good evidence for something that's come by the way of necessity or chance, or necessity and chance, if you prefer. And so, I don't think it's a case where it's like a balance, you know, we're taking some kind of leap. I think the non-theistic position is not just contra intuition, but really contra a good reading of data that we see. And also nothing appealing about it, not only not evidentially true, but a consideration that's important, not very desirable, not very practical. So I always, conversations with atheists are interesting because I never understand the appeal in regards to looking at the evidence, and I never understand the appeal to someone saying, come over here. This is the better life. This is the good life. It's always a bit perplexing to me, but I try to, understand as best as I can nonetheless.
Okay. I'm most familiar with the telescope one of the fine-tuning argument. So obviously the fine-tuning argument is something like if we change any of the physical constants even slightly, life wouldn't be possible in the universe. If we increase the gravitational constant, everything would collapse into a black hole. If we decrease it, everything would go further away from each other faster than it can bond into stars and planets and stuff. So either way, life is impossible. But how is this indicative of a designer? Because that's the part I'm missing. Like, to me, it doesn't seem to be indicative of anything. Like, I'd say that.
No, because that just can't happen. I mean, it's like on old radios. The reason there's a tuning element, you get it just right, get that song. That doesn't happen by chance and necessity. It happens by way of purpose and intent.
So, like, if there's a spectrum, like a line graph, it goes on infinitely far, positive, negative, and there's a little tiny red dot somewhere in one of the numbers or whatever, and we're in that red dot. Now, the question is does the fact that we're in this tiny little spectrum indicate design? And I'd say no, because for each possible way the universe could be, there's a possible way God could be. For each possible way the universe could be, God could want the universe to be that way. So, for example, there's a universe of only black holes. Like, if we increase the gravitational constant, maybe God could want that universe, or a universe of only, I don't know, unicorns. Maybe God could want that universe. And so for each possible way the universe could be, there's a possible way God could be. And so if the fact that we're all on this little tiny dot among this large spectrum requires an explanation, well, then you need an explanation for why is God on this little tiny dot of the way God could be, that he wants a life permitting universe as opposed to wanting a black hole permitting universe. So it seems like the fine-tuning argument is a problem in both equally. I don't see why it would be an advantage one way or the other.
Oh, so you do think it's a problem for your position then?
Well, it's an unknown, so sure, like there's always unknowns that we try to make an answer for, but I think the best answer is the fine structure constant. It's determined by an unknown force that we have to discover.
You're saying there's an unknown force that we might discover that will explain why the universe appears to be finely tuned? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like all the different constants have relations between them, and those relations are described by the fine structure constant, and the fine structure constant could be caused by an undiscovered law of physics, and that would explain all of the different combinations of constants. And that seems like a better explanation than a God.
So you're saying the better explanation is the explanation that has not yet been discovered yet?
Well, I don't think any explanation has been discovered yet. That's why it's a problem. If any explanation was discovered, it wouldn't be a problem anymore. So all of them are hypothetical, but the one in physics, the fine structure constant, has a basis in physics. Like the fine structure constant theories are all built on known principles, particles, and laws in physics that have been verified in some way. It's just a new combination of the verified stuff. Whereas like a God hypothesis would be a combination of properties that haven't been discovered in physics: omniscience, omnibenevolence, all the different omnis, whatever, outside of space and time, minds that can exist without changes or whatever properties you want to describe a God with. None of those exist in the field of physics, but all of the properties of the fine structure constant do exist in physics. All the properties of the multiverse exist in physics. Those all have evidence, and so those would be better than a God. In the same way as, like, if we saw a footprint in the snow or hoof print in the snow, you'd say it's probably a horse that did that, because we have prior evidence horses exist, even though we don't see a horse anywhere. And that would be better than saying a unicorn, because we have no prior evidence of unicorns. So I'd say that's why the necessity or chance options are better than design here.
Yeah, you're right about omniscience. It's not something that we can apply to, I guess, whatever term you want to use, the laws of physics. But the definition of the God under discussion, he wouldn't be something that would adhere to the laws of physics. He's instituting them. So I hear what you're saying. You're right that this God can't be submitted to the laws of physics or anything like that. I'm not saying he contradicts them, but I'm saying the God under discussion is spiritual. He's mental, if you want to use that. You could even say conceptual. I'm not saying merely conceptual, but at the very least conceptual. So yeah, you're right, but we're looking for the wrong kind of explanation, I think, if we say, well, this God doesn't adhere to anything we know in physics. But why would a non-physical God be able to be categorized by physical laws,
Oh, well, I agree. That's not the argument I was going for. It's
Oh,
more
okay.
that,
Help me understand
like,
that.
if I'm trying to make a theory to explain something in physics, let's
Uh-huh.
say WIMPs, weakly interactive massive particles or whatever, and I take the gravitational constant, the bosons and electrons, and then I add in magical leprechauns. Now, if I just have the three things in physics that we've already confirmed, bosons, electrons, gravitational constant, that's a decent theory because it's using only pieces that have been verified with evidence. If I add in something that doesn't have any evidence, like magic leprechauns, that the theory is now a worse theory. It's bad because you've added in something that doesn't have a basis in evidence. And so for each part of the theory you add in that doesn't have evidence, the theory is worse than one that does have evidence. And so it doesn't matter if what you're adding in is spiritual or supernatural, ubernatural, whatever. If it doesn't have evidence, then the theory is worse than if you only have pieces that do have evidence. And so having a theory like the fine structure constant, which only has pieces that have been verified by physics, is a better theory than having that plus a God, because the properties of God, as you said, haven't been verified by physics. They don't have a basis in evidence. And so using them as an explanation is kind of like using magical leprechauns or something, just positing something new that doesn't have evidence to explain the data.
Well, not being verified by physics is not identical to not being subject to the laws of physics, or not having evidence, as you said. It's true that we wouldn't expect a non-physical God to be bound or explained by the laws of physics, especially if he's instituting them, which, note, people don't like it, but that's an explanation. The explanation I hear you giving forward is there will be some forthcoming explanation to explain these things that we haven't discovered yet, but we know it will be better than God. That's what I hear. So you can see why it's not all that convincing when we say, well, this God is capable. He's not spatial, so he's not bound by any of these physical constants himself, and yet he's omniscient and all powerful, so he has the ability to create them. Very different than other A and E gods, for example. There's not candidates like this as far as when you talk about Yahweh. And as far as these constants, I mean, that's a massive question in itself. We're assuming, there are these constants, they're uniform. Well, why is that? Why is it that these things are constant? There's really, on atheism, I've never seen any good explanation where we can say this is constant because this is uniform because. I've just heard most people basically say, well, that's how it is, or that's all we've ever seen, but I've never heard, why is it constant? Why is it uniform? Christians have an answer, right? We have a God who regulates this. We have a God who oversees this. We have a God who ordains that this will how it be, and a God who's sovereign, and he doesn't have to, do what Ra did and all that in ancient Kemet. This is a different kind of God, really the one candidate. I've just never understood on atheism why we just assume things are constant or regular. Why is that? Because you would admit that they are. The uniformity of nature would be something I imagine you would say is true, correct?
No. Some of them
No.
are. Like the gravity's changed. Gravity was repulsive at the end of the universe, so the laws of physics have changed. But the explanation on atheism, why some of them are constant, is essentially like a Hoberman sphere. Hoberman sphere is it's a ball that you like grab two ends and it like grows in every direction as you pull it and close it. Little kid's toy. If all of the laws are the ones that are constant are interconnected, then any change to one will necessitate a change to another. So like we discovered that the weak and the electromagnetic force are the same force. If you change one, that you change the other, because at high enough temperatures they fuse into a single force. So they can't be different because they're the same force. And so if all of these forces are connected by something that forces them to have the same proportionality, then that would explain why they have this fine tuning, because they're necessarily connected with this relation, which is called the fine structure constant. 1/137 is the number. And so that would explain why we're fine tuned, why the relative strength of gravity is comparable to the relative energy density of space, which is comparable to the the strength of the strong and weak electromagnetic forces. If all of these things are tied together by some force, then that would explain why they are all so proportionate to life because they're determined to be that way. So that seems to me like a better explanation than God, because saying God did it to me sounds like saying a leprechaun did it. Like obviously you
Can
can
I
make
ask
up
you
an
why
explanation.
though, Tom? I mean,
Sure,
I'm sorry if I interrupted at the end.
no problem.
I understand what I'm trying to track here and all that, but honestly, why is it that saying the God of the Bible did it is like saying leprechaun did it? Let's just take that serious for a second.
Mhm.
So leprechaun is a contingent being. They are not all powerful. They are physical, right? You see what I'm saying? What ability
Um,
does a leprechaun have to create everything that we know? So you're saying that, but by definition, the leprechaun doesn't match any of these things that we have. The leprechaun did not reveal his name in Exodus 3:14 as I am, I be, I exist. The God of the Bible has. The leprechaun doesn't have the ability to control reality, because the leprechaun on any rendering of what a leprechaun is didn't create the reality. I guess leprechauns, kids have leprechaun parents. They're contingent beings. They're physical. So why is it that it
a
sounds like
leprechaun,
a
I'm talking about
leprechaun did it to you? Do you see what I'm saying? I don't think it is the same at all.
when I say leprechaun, kids don't have leprechaun parents. Leprechaun, I mean like the magical green wearing pot of gold
Mhm.
dancing Irish thingy. So
Well, they have to come from somewhere. On a leprechaun story, leprechauns would come from somewhere, right? They're not beings that can be described as anything other than contingent, right? They're dependent on something prior, correct? Wouldn't you say?
well, either one is actually possible here, but the reason
You
these are the
think, hold on, hold
same,
on. You think leprechauns could be eternal?
sure,
Well, what makes you think that leprechauns could be eternal?
there's no logical contradiction, therefore it's possible.
Well, yes, there would be. Leprechauns are physical.
No,
Leprechauns are not physical,
no, they're magic. They're magical beings. They don't
but
exist.
even magic, there's properties associated with it. And
Well,
you're
there's
saying magic. Well, I don't know if they're magic. I think we can say they're legendary. But let's talk about the leprechaun and
well,
see, is it really
let
the
me answer
same?
your question. So
Sure.
why is it the same to say God created the universe to say leprechaun created the universe?
Yeah.
The reason they're the same is because they add a new ontology. Um, there's the stuff we have, the physical stuff, and then you want to say this physical stuff is caused by this other kind of stuff that we don't have evidence for, whether it's supernatural God stuff or it's magical leprechaun stuff. It doesn't make a difference what the properties of these are. Now, I reject contingent and necessary and contingent as legitimate properties. I don't think those do describe anything necessarily. But even if I granted those, it wouldn't make a difference here, because we could say there's this universe of um, magic, and this universe of magic is created by is just an essence of magic with no mind or whatever, and leprechauns are eternal beings, and this essence of magic, and one leprechaun named Bob created our universe or whatever, and so he set the laws of physics. That's a potential explanation. There's no logical contradiction there, but it's not a good explanation, because essentially you've posited something that has no basis in reality, no evidence, this magic field or whatever, to explain what created our universe, which is a bad explanation. A good explanation would be using a combination of things that we know exist. Like we have to differentiate imagination from reality. And if you have some combination of things in physics that exist, that we know exist independent of our imagination, and those could potentially cause the universe, like the multiverse theory, that would be a better explanation than leprechauns, because there's no evidence of the magic field thing that they're using. This just doesn't exist. I think the same thing would apply to God here. There's no evidence of this supernatural field or supernatural powers that God has, just like there's no evidence of the magic field of the leprechauns. And because of that, both of those are equivalent hypotheses, because they add in this new ontology compared to like the multiverse, which is only a combination of two things in physics, which is goose, early universe inflation, and that virtual particles and the Casimir effect. Both of those things have been observed, and so that would be a better theory, kind of like a horse is a better theory to explain the hoof print than a unicorn is.
Okay, so I'm looking at the live chat, and I'm not saying that you, Tom, are making the same mistake as the live chat, but some of the
Always
people,
ignore the chat. Always ignore the chat.
well, because you get a sense of where your audience is at. And I just want to clarify to the live chat, I'm not saying, Tom, you're making this mistake, so please don't take it that way. To the live chat, I am not arguing that leprechauns exist. I am not arguing that. What I'm saying is, if leprechauns existed, since that was his example he gave, let's ask what their properties would be. and then ask if it really is the same thing to say that leprechauns created everything as the God of the Bible. I was taking what he said seriously. I do not believe that leprechauns exist. That's not what I was saying. I just
accepted it for the sake of the argument.
Yeah, and honestly, Tom, so like you've talked to a lot of people, and I've never understood the kind of casual statements that guys like you make, and I appreciate a lot what you do. So please don't take it in a certain kind of way, because I don't mean it, and it comes kind of secretly diss, where they make these after all these conversations with all kinds of people, they're still willing to say something that it just. I guess it seems beneath the nature of the discussion or the argument, or perhaps even you, where you say, well, yeah, saying the God of the Bible is the same thing as saying a leprechaun made everything. But, even in your explanation you just gave, you said, yeah, so this leprechaun for no reason out of magic created everything from nothing. Well, so on a personal deity that we hold to as Christians, we have a reason for why things could even start. The deity who is personal can make a decision in time and space to act. Not only has the capacity to decide, but has the ability to then enact his will. This is by definition of the God of the Bible. A leprechaun, however we want to define such a creature, if he was real, would not have those same kind of things. And you said, well, for some reason,
but from my perspective, that seems like God has some psychological state, and I would. By the definition of a leprechaun, it would also have some psychological state with motivations. And so I'd say they'll be the same between the two. So God has a motivation to create the universe. And I'd say the leprechaun also has some motivation to create the universe too. So I wouldn't say that would be a difference.
I got you a couple fascinating things in there that you just said. One is a psychological state. I agree that that's a requirement to get this thing jumped off. Otherwise, why does it ever jump off? Especially if it extends infinitely into the past. I think that's actually required. Let me just put this out there. The leprechaun has more explanatory power than nothing. And what I find atheists giving most people is nothing. It's nothing extended way back, and then they do things like redefine nothing. And I don't know exactly where you land on this. I don't think a leprechaun has explanatory power, but it does have more explanatory power than nothing for no reason equals everything. And so, you said, well, leprechaun for some reason, and then you mentioned magic. Frankly, the history of the universe and of the planet that most atheists have to put forward looks way more like magic than anything I've seen put forward by Christians. And let me explain what I mean by that. You have non-life that produces life. You have everything produced by nothing. And I think it's a violation of the principle of sufficient reason. There's a massive effect with no cause.
I just want to clarify, like, nobody in physics believes something came from nothing. That is a lie. Lawrence Krauss lied about it. He's just manipulating the data. Nobody in physics believes that. That's not a thing. No physicist believes that. They always think there is a precursor thing, multiverse, mini world, string theory. Like, there was a poll of what is the foundational attitude towards quantum mechanics, and they just went through all the different hypotheses of what created the Big Bang. Nothing is a 0%. Nothing is a 0% on that poll. No physicists believe it. Not even Lawrence Krauss believes that. He's just redefining nothing.
Right. That's why I mentioned about how he redefines it. He's here. Well, he was here at Arizona State. I've went out and seen him a few times and whatnot, even a couple email exchanges, stuff like that. Just a minute. Just turn it off with the key. I don't know. Maybe check the room. I don't know. But it's okay either way. But I think it's an overstatement when you say no one. We're talking about all of history. And we're talking about all of history.
Oh, I mean, like no modern physicists, no one in physics.
Maybe that's true, but whenever atheists start talking about what they have in place instead of nothing, it's very difficult to track and see how it has any explanatory power. You mentioned the leprechaun going back there, right? Having a psychological state to be able to decide to enact. I've never heard any explanation that gives a reason for a decision to act, because all the somethings that I've heard so far, and maybe there's an exception, they're all impersonal.
Yeah.
So there's really no reason why there should even be a start or a beginning, but clearly there was, right?
Right. So what I think is actually the case is a quantum field. I think a quantum field is the foundational whatever makes up reality. I think the quantum field is the necessary being, essentially, and it doesn't have a mind or intentionalities.
Right.
I think it has a nature to it, and its nature entails certain kinds of property shifts that or change that make the universe, and it does that through decay, essentially random decay, like a uranium particle. Uranium particles randomly decay over an infinite spectrum of time, and that ability, that randomness factor, is a property of reality which can cause this state change from the initial state of the universe to something without an intentional state. I actually think an intentional state causing it doesn't seem to make sense. I don't think
Wait,
intentional
hold on. I'm going
states.
to follow you on that. You're saying you believe that unintentionality better explains the current state of the universe than intentionality.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
And so do you don't see that as a problematic or strange or weird statement? That seems perfectly commonsensical to you. And I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm saying, like, you're dead serious that
Yep.
unintentionality better explains the universe we see better than intentionality.
Yeah, 100%. Like, all of the evidence I've seen indicates that space and time is emergent from a quantum field. That's a very legitimate, well-supported theory in physics. There is nothing in physics that indicates intentionality or minds or decisions can exist outside of space-time. It's like there's as much evidence that pineapples can exist outside of space-time. There's just zero. But quantum fields have a lot of evidence they could exist outside of space-time. That's the consensus in physics, is that space and time are emergent, created from quantum fields. And there's a lot of reasons to believe that, from looking at the data, from making predictions in confirmatory experiments. And so, because there's a lot of evidence to support this, it seems to be a far better explanation. I agree, intuitively it probably isn't, because we have intuitions that prioritize things similar to us. We're very anthropocentric beings. But from the evidence perspective, it's a far better explanation, because it has a basis in reality that has been demonstrated to be not just a figment of our imagination.
So quantum fields, you believe, have creative power.
Sort of.
Are they still creating things that we should be aware of that are substantial, that we see quantum fields creating, would you say?
Virtual particles, yes.
Tell me about, do you believe that that's evidence that quantum fields created out of chance and necessity everything that we see?
Well, yes. I mean, even design is a kind of necessity. So I don't, chance and necessity are really the only two options. Even if you have a designer, it has to have like a necessary nature or something. So chance and necessity are the only real options, I think.
Well, of course, unless you have an intelligent designer, you're right, they are.
Well,
But see,
even if you have an intelligent designer, its nature would either have to have been a result of chance or necessity. Like, it couldn't have chosen its own nature, right?
well, what if the being is self-existent, then by definition it is what it is. I mean, this is essentially adhering to I would even say a fundamental law of logic, the law of identity. And there's really
Right, but
nothing else like that, because everything else is created with attributes or characteristics predetermined by the creator, as Yahweh tells Moses. But there's a reason and explanation with that. Upon quantum fields, I can't see why we can say, well, the quantum field chose to do this, because, of course, the quantum field doesn't choose to do anything.
well, just to clarify, so if God has a nature to him, like A equals A, like you said, that's necessary, right? You'd say that couldn't be otherwise.
I think I do agree with that. I'm not trying to enter. I think what you're saying there, I think we agree there, but go ahead.
Right, right. So there's only two options. Either God's nature was like a random thing, or it was a necessary thing. And
Right.
so I think it has to be either random or necessary. Fundamentally, as the final explanation of everything, has to be one of those two.
Right. We got a boring single father to the live chat. In a way, I appreciate it. Someone's giving me my bio. They're not a big fan of me. I can tell, obviously, by their comments, but I don't mind at all. It's interesting live chat there. They
pay the bills, so I let them go rage.
yeah, I got you. Well, let me bring it back. Tom, I am a Bible guy. Okay, so I don't try to hide behind that, and I understand that's not going to endear me to your live chat, but I'm okay with that. And not because I dislike them or anything, just because I do. People would disagree, but I care about truth, so I want to point back to the basis, and I don't deny that this is the basis. Because earlier you said something holding it together. So I'm going to posit someone holding it together. And I do have a biblical verse for that. Colossians 1, verse 15, go down to verse probably 20. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And here's a key verse. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That's the key verse I wanted to read there. All things hold together. And so really it's ultimately a someone, not a something or a quantum field or anything like that. So it is true, you mentioned earlier about these laws of physics interacting with each other. And I think at one point you used the word systems. Gonna agree with all that. But the question is, how is it that they all work together? How is it that we can use the term system to describe them, which sounds like something set up? And I understand that's not what you're saying, so I'm not trying to play a word game, but I'm just saying I think those are realities, and it's difficult a lot of times to describe them by any other way. And you would say, here's our intuition. Yeah, we are anthropocentric, so we see that. But that's interesting too. Last thing I want to say on this, to make sure I don't go too long at any one point, but check this out. Stephen Meyer makes this point, and I think there's some validity to it. The idea of when we're positing an intelligent designer. Remember, I started with Romans 1, so I'm not arguing for like a bare theism. I did start with Romans 1 and go from there. Whenever we see language coding, in fact, there's an element of arbitrariness to languages. Like, why does A equal the sound ah or whatever? Well, there's an element of arbitrariness because someone decided what the signifier would mean, right? Well, we see that in DNA, for example. We see all this kind of stuff, and so then we ask the question, well, why is that? And whenever we see that kind of activity, we always posit it to a mind. At least we should, because we know of no other thing, for lack of a better word, that creates specified information, that creates, we may say new information, which of course itself is non-physical. And so when we say, look at these elements, I mentioned the microscope to the telescope, I mentioned the internal, the external in the beginning when I went to Romans. Well, there it is. There it is. It's what no other explanation accords with anything we've ever seen. We don't have any examples of, well, this thing generated information. Now, that's different than carrying information. I understand we could talk about DNA and vehicles information, but the actual origination of the information, purely abstract, purely mental, not even physical. Even information is carried by physical elements, but it's not even physical. And so it's not a stretch. In fact, it accords with what we actually know. You see design, you recognize a designer. You see language, you recognize thought behind it, because in layman's terms, language is the skin on our thoughts. You recognize those things. And all these other explanations people give, they end up sounding like something so far outside of our experience. Quantum fields creating things inadvertently, and no intentionality behind what looks to be the most intentional systems known to man, because they're sitting there latent. We discover them later, and then we're still trying to figure them out. So it's not just intuitions; it is evidence. It is evidence. When I say why I don't hold to atheism.
Well, so I'd kind of agree if that was the case. If what you were saying was true, then it would be evidence. Like if we saw abstract representations of information like a blueprint, and that blueprint was then turned into a physical object in a non-physically determined way, then yeah, I'd consider that evidence. But all like information in DNA is physical information. It's from a paper, Shannon Information Theory in 1954. Information is a product of a stochastic system. Stochastic is random. So all of the information described in DNA, which is the consensus among everybody in biology, is completely physical, completely deterministic. There's no abstractions there. It's all just physical determined things that are going from the ATCG to the codons to the proteins to the DNA. All that stuff is physically determined, like crystals are physically determined. So none of that is abstract information, which is the consensus among pretty much 99 something % of experts in the field. It's very, very well agreed upon. So if your interpretation of the data was correct, I would admit that it's evidence, but I don't think it is from my understanding of the field. But I wanted to go back to my
could I ask one question? When you said information
Sure.
is physical,
Yep.
What did you mean by information is physical?
Information is a set pattern in physical shape data. So like the folding patterns in proteins, the codons in DNA, the like 3-letter things that are matched. It's all physical.
The
None of the
instruction,
information.
the instructions, but
Yeah, it's all
see,
physical. It's all physical
a
shape.
set pattern.
Yes. So the pattern is the shape.
So when you say set pattern, that doesn't belie intentionality to you.
No. So like if we look at crystals have a pattern. Rocks have a pattern. Hurricanes have a pattern. Pattern just means like a structure, a mathematically shaped structure of some kind. It's just not random.
Right, and I don't know of how we can say that equals unintentional, something that's not. I don't know how that can equal anything other than intentionality, though.
Well, we'd start with agnosticism, like we don't know if it's intentional or if it's design, and so we'd have to make a hypothesis. If this was intentional, here's some prediction we would expect to see. If this was a random process of a natural system, here's what we'd expect to see. And we take those two hypotheses and see which one can do the most work and tell us the most about the world and get it right before we know it. And when we do that, the one that makes successful testable predictions is the one that says this is a natural process. Here's what we would expect to see. We can expect to see RNA forming on clay and corpuscles forming on clay formations, and we can expect to see cell division and single cell organisms fusing into multicellular organisms under certain conditions, and we'd be able to watch microevolution happen inside certain bacterial formations from E. coli to form the ability to process vitamin C, which we see. So all of the model that is able to tell us about the future accurately is the one we should believe. And the one that can do that seems to be the natural process one, not the design one. So we shouldn't just assume it's one or the other. What we should do is say, I have a hypothesis that this is way X, and if this is true, here's what we would expect to see, and then do some experiments. And the ones that get the experiments right, that's the one that has the evidence.
You said natural process. We'll go with that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe we found a suitable natural process that creates life from non-life?
Not entirely, but of the process, there's about 10,000 different steps that are required to make life. And in those steps, we can explain about 1,000 of them naturally. So
what percentage of the way are we there, would you say?
Well, I have no idea how to express that. Like
1,000 out of 1,000 out of 10,000.
Sure, 10%.
So you believe we're 10% of the way there? Do you believe that we'll see the other 90% in our lifetime?
Very likely, yes. But more importantly, the comparison here is like how much evidence does the natural process have versus the design hypothesis? As far as I know, the design hypothesis has made 0 testable predictions to confirm any of the steps, whereas the natural one has explained like 1,000 steps. And so comparatively, the natural process is so much better because it's been able to make testable predictions to confirm its explanation of these steps, whereas the design hypothesis hasn't. It's just said, I think design did it, and that's kind of like full stop. And now where do we go from here?
Tom, that's really what you think? That's how you think design theorists operate? They just say, hey, God did it, and they stop?
No, I think that they've attempted to. I know Stephen Meyer has attempted to make 10 predictions in his book, but when those predictions get tested, they found to be false or incomplete. And so it's not that they haven't tried, it's that they haven't succeeded. There hasn't been any methodological success of using intelligent design to make successful predictions in the field of biology, whereas there has in naturalism.
Well, I think junk DNA would be an example.
Oh, I think that'd be an example of one that failed. So the junk DNA and the ENCODE project, I'm very familiar with these. The way the ENCODE project defined function was any kind of bonding feature. And bonding features happen all the time and don't produce any meaningful proteins or anything. Lots of stuff bonds for no reason. And so if you just define any kind of bonding as a function, then you're going to get a lot of things that you're going to call a function that don't do anything. And so by that definition, a lot of things were called functions that were in fact non-functional, which is why the consensus among the field is that the amount of coding DNA, which is what is typically the use for function in the field of biology, is accurately defined by the typical information, the 90 or what 80% is junk DNA, 80% is non-functional, non-coding DNA
Well,
by the
non-coding and
typical definition.
non-functional, those shouldn't be conflated, though. That's kind of the whole point.
Well, they should be. They should be like how you define a function is really important to the conversation. Like if it does literally any bonds to literally anything, that's not a good definition of function, because you can have random bonds that don't accomplish anything. It's just because the shape of the cells or the shape of the proteins are going to bond with other proteins because they're all the same 3 different combinations of stuff, the same codons. So it's obviously going to bond with a lot of stuff, but it mostly doesn't do anything. Most of the bonds miss and don't produce successfully reproducing proteins. It just doesn't do anything. But if you want to count that as a function, then it looks like they're doing things even though they're not, which is why the consensus in biology is that the ENCODE project used a non-standard definition of function, which is not accepted in the field of biology and is too broad, which means their definition does not accurately reflect the definition of function used in the field of biology.
So, I like, this conversation. Someone mentioned, and it is true, this is not the conversation I normally get to have. I wonder, have you ever looked at this book, The Myth of Junk DNA?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the Discovery Institute.
Well, I mean, this particular book in particular, because it talks about, these functions of non-protein coding, RNAs, and also of introns. There's some fascinating stuff. And I think, I think this isn't a show on that, but I think that the prediction that no, these will have a function is born fruition. I guess you're saying it doesn't. But even in that context, it's interesting what you said. You say, oh, lots of stuff bonds for no reason. Well, there's reasons it bonds. It has to do with certain properties and what will and kind of won't go together. Even those, we have to say, why are those characteristics that way? The big one, of course, is H2O. If that didn't go down the way it goes down, you don't really have a basis for life. Even these very things that we would say are simple are not very simple, and it screams intentionality. I know that if you dispose of God in your worldview, you really have no other option. So then it's obvious that it was done in the ways you speak of. But then you start looking at it, and it's not really natural after all. We don't see examples of language without intentionality. We don't see even examples, I would say, of some of the aesthetic beauty that we see, even down at the DNA level. There's the elegance. And I do like what Meyer says, the signature in the cell. And that's an interesting title in a lot of ways. So I think, that's an evidential thing. Plus even internally, as I mentioned, our cells, it's like, why do we even think these things? Why do we think that, patterns in design equal designer? Well, one is we know what it is like to create, and we've never seen anything, really any contrary example. We have not seen contrary examples. Every time something is posited, it simply doesn't have the explanatory power. Whether we did posit a leprechaun behind the electron, to use the Turner phrase, or posit quantum fields or another universe, that's essentially undetected, or gravitational fields, it never has the proper explanatory power. And a big reason is it's not personal. And so I've never understood why people think we can get personality, to use kind of a vague definition there, from non-personal elements. And that's why I understand atheists are like, man, this God thing doesn't appeal to me, X, Y, Z. I don't know about other Christians, but I feel very similar. When I hear these explanations, I'm trying to track, but how is that really a good explanation? But I guess there's really no other option if you do away with an intelligent designer, if you do away with, for lack of a better word, a supreme being. We don't really have any other options, do you?
Well, I mean, we do. You can say aliens did it. We can have design without a God, but I think the reason we go with this one is because it has the most evidence, not because there's no other option. I think that even if something seems intuitively challenging and hard to believe, if it has the most evidence, you should go with that position, even if it's hard to understand. So whatever position can make novel testable predictions and use the hypothesis to accurately give us information about the future before we know it, and it gets it right significantly more than any other option,
We
That's the
don't
thing you got to
we
go
don't
with.
agree on that. I don't agree with that at all. I don't know
Which part?
why you think that. Making these testable predictions. I mean, what in our experience or what in science tells us that you're going to be able to get life from non-life? What tells us that you're going to be able to get ordered systems from non-order? You may not say nothing, but there's no intentionality in any of the things that you're positing. That's not just hard to understand. That's impossible to believe. There's no
Well,
reason we should believe that we see design without a designer, order without someone putting an order, patterns without someone setting the pattern, language without an intellect behind it, and a speaker, for lack of a better word, activity without decision. There's no reason why we should think any of those things. Those are all not just counterintuitive; they're contra to what we see demonstrated. We don't see these kinds of things. That's why you have to posit some unknown thing, maybe aliens. Well, that could be evidence. Well, who, where, when, why, there's no good evidence for that, of course, but it has to be something like that. It has to be some process we don't replicate. Otherwise, we could make life from non-life.
well, we do see those things like in chemistry. Chemistry is all patterns and information and
Yes.
language without,
Yeah.
and it's not because this is before life. This is non-living chemical materials, and that stuff. Most theists agree is also naturally occurring, and so we don't need a designer to have systems or language or patterns or complex systems that are based on
No,
folds
no,
and
no,
shapes and things.
no. But
Um,
a theist is not saying that those things are in place, accidental or random. So you're saying they're natural. Yes, they occur in nature, no doubt. But the question is, why? Let's
right.
go back to the Bible again. Let me give you a verse for that.
Oh,
Hebrews chapter 1.
I do
It's
want to
only,
say,
it's
be
only
respectful of your time really quick. You said 45 minutes or like the 50-minute mark, so I just wanted to like let you know.
Yes. Okay. So last verse, and then I'll let you finish with whatever you have. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed the heir of all things, through whom also He created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of His nature, and He upholds the universe by the word of His power. So again, what I'm trying to represent there is what Scripture says, and I believe what accords with not only our intuitions but reality. And that's the final thing I have to say. I'm willing to let you have any kind of last word, unless this would be the one exception. If we could briefly interact with some of these live chat comments,
Oh
I
yeah,
would.
absolutely.
I could
But
definitely extend a little bit of time for that
for
because
sure,
you're chill, you're cool, which I totally appreciate. But bro, your fans,
they send me money. But
they
I do want to make a summary. Like, so I think the atheist position is best defined by the fact that we are only allowed to accept hypotheses that have novel testable predictions. If it doesn't have novel testable predictions, it's always going to be seen as worse. And so in the case of quantum fields, we have those. We have the Casimir effect. It's a thing we can test and view in a lab and confirm it exists. Quantum fields create virtual particles. And we don't have that for miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs. So all of those are out until they make testable predictions, are always going to be worse from the atheist perspective because they lack that kind of demonstrable evidence that quantum fields have. So no matter how strange quantum fields may seem, because they have evidence, they're going to be better, which is why we think that's a better explanation of the origin of the universe than a god.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember Tom arguing for UFOs and all that other stuff you said, and even miracles, even by definition, are not to be identified with the same thing as magic. So those other things, interesting. I don't know why you threw those in there because I'm not caping for those. But okay, I hear
Well,
you.
that was again because I was trying to say from the atheist perspective, all things that posit a new ontology that doesn't have evidence are the same. So magic and God and leprechauns, new ontology, no evidence. So from our perspective, they're the same.
Right. Well, I quoted a couple Bible verses for y'all. Let me quote because we talked a little bit about these regularities of temporal succession order. I do like this quote by Swinburne here. Maybe we'll end with that for someone who's going to complain, man, 3 Bible verses. What's wrong with this guy? I'll give you one philosopher quote that I think is helpful for this. This is Swinburne from The Argument from Design. Here, a brief quote. Almost all regularities of succession are due to the normal operation of scientific laws. But to say this is simply to say that these regularities are instances of more general regularities. The operation of the most fundamental regularities clearly cannot be given a normal scientific explanation. If their operation is to receive an explanation and not merely be left as a brute fact, that explanation must therefore be in terms of the rational choice of a free agent. End quote. Summing up some of what I said there today. But are we able to interact with the live chat here?
Go for it.
Well, let me see here. I mean, I don't know. Do you put comments on the screen or how do you?
Yeah, if you want. Which one would you like? Fuckface Jeffrey says, did you watch Fight Club? Yes, I did. Yes, I did watch Fight Club. Thank you for the donation. Efont says, please ask, does he need intention? Why does he need intentionality so much?
Well, design needs intentionality. I don't personally go around saying that I need intentionality. Design, order, rationality needs intentionality. That's what needs intentionality.
Gotcha.
So everybody needs intentionality. That's why they have to, when people are at work, they have to do certain things to get certain things, and they all require intentionality. If you're building Legos, if you're putting together a puzzle, whatever it is, if you're constructing the puzzle and then deconstruct it and put it back, all that intentionality. To write a book, intentionality, and that's what we see.
Brian Stevens asked, if I was drowning right now and had 30 seconds to convince me that God was real, what would you say?
I wouldn't try to convince him of theism if he's drowning. I would convince him of his sin. So I would say, you have committed sin against a holy God. The holy God holds you accountable. He created all things, including you. You're about to meet him. You want to be in right standing, and the only way to do that is by confessing with your mouth and believing in your heart that Lord Jesus has been raised from the dead. Are you ready to do that? So you can meet him with Christ's righteousness, not on your own. I would not attempt to convince him of bare theism if he has 30 seconds left. But I also might instead try to help him get out of the water. That's the first thing I would do. And if I was really good, I could multitask while I'm helping him get out of the water, preach that 30-second sermon.
Yeah. Did you see any comments you wanted to specifically?
Well, it's just, why I had to say that? Because Jason Horner says, maybe save his life instead of preaching to him. So the person asked me a setup question. If he had 30 seconds, what would you say to him? I give the answer, but then I have to say I would try to save his life because folks don't believe in because Jason, that's what he asked me. So that's why I responded to that. I just
people.
We're never going to get very far, and I don't know if people are interested in getting far in civility and all that kind of stuff. If people always assume the worst intentions and read everything the most kind of ill way and this kind of thing, but this is what we have. But we live in a society together. We can have these disagreements to try to get along. If I thought of atheists the way these atheists think of Christians, my goodness. It'd be very difficult to get along. I mean, literally, the Prestige. I hate this guy. What did I do to deserve hate here today, Tom? Can you tell me?
I believe it's actually a relational case. So, like, if you have had bad experiences with other people who have a similar kind of belief, the person will remind you of those beliefs, and so you hate them by extension. I think that's typically why.
Yeah, isn't that what racists and bigots do? Do you think he should hate me, Tom?
No, I don't think so, unless you specifically did something to him that I don't know about, but probably not.
I don't know who he is. You're intentionally spreading misinformation. No, my goodness. I hate this guy. What is it that introduces such derision and this kind of feeling from me sitting here talking all casual, reading a couple Bible verses and ending with Richard Swinburne? I just do not, honestly, it's such a different way of thinking about life. I don't hate anyone in the live chat. I don't hate you, Tom. I've never heard an atheist in my life speak and think, I hate this guy. Never. I just do not understand, boy. F-Boy Malone, 21st Century Rambo. F-Boy Malone. Oh, man. Oh, man.
So I love it because it boosts the algorithm just so much. So many more people like the rage and the responses to the rage. So keeps the viewership.
Tom, you're chill, but I on my little programs I do, I'm just some random guy, right? I try to train the audience. If they come on and they say some racist stuff or they're like that, I tell them, hey, no. And I don't care if they give a super chat. I don't care if they pay the bills. They get timed out. They get blocked. Now, if Hebrew Israelites come on, I don't really have much of a standard for them because I expect them to kind of act how the religion dictates. So I say, we let them pretty much get away with murder. There's definitely a double standard. But anyone else, especially if I know they claim the name of Christ, I work my best to train my audience. I tell them, no, don't treat them that way. Nah, that's not right. That's not how we roll. Because your audience pay your bills, you literally let them get away with anything. I think you need to do a better
I do
job
this for money
training
and fun.
your audience. Huh?
So I do this for money and fun. So if they're having fun, that's all I want. I'm okay. Just ignore the chat.
Well, sometimes you wonder if one person's fun. Oh, anyways, I'll stop there. But I appreciate the conversation. You said about 45 minutes. I'm good with that if you're good. Cool. And you're okay if I put parts of this up at some point in my channel. I think that was our pre-discussion, right?
Yep. All my stuff is free for anybody to copy and edit however they want. So go for it.
I appreciate that. Anything else?
Nope. Thanks for the conversation. It was great having you on. Pleasant talking with you, and I hope to talk with you again sometime.
Appreciate that. And also shout out to the gentleman, Jeff. He was really patient because sometimes I didn't get back with him right away. And I know this took forever. So I apologize for that. It's not because I'm just trying to learn how to manage my time and all this kind of stuff. Life is tricky, so I apologize for that. I appreciate you guys for being patient with me. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you very much. Have a great day. God bless. Peace.